Hi everyone, welcome back to Feather Stitch House. My name's Rebecca and each week on this channel I upload videos about embroidery and textile art to help you get creative. We're in week 2 of our August Winging It project, and last week we went back to our childhood and learnt some new printing techniques to create custom fabric. This week we're focusing on the Olympics and we're going to create 5 Olympic rings using 5 different techniques. Now I've just got back from my holiday away, and so it's been quite a tight turnaround to get this video ready for our regular slot on a Sunday afternoon. So do forgive the length of this video. Because we're doing specific techniques, I have put in some chapter markers for this one. So if there's a technique that you're familiar with or one that you're not so interested in, please do feel free to skip through the chapters to the bits that matter to you. So gather some bits and pieces and let's get stitching.
Right, it feels like ages since I worked on this piece, and this is where we left off. So last time we learnt how to make a digital print on fabric using a normal inkjet printer and some jiggery pokery on a desktop publishing application, and this is what we came up with. So I bubble printed, went back to my childhood, blew some bubbles in some paint and took this print onto a piece of paper and then scanned that paper and printed it out onto my fabric. If you didn't see that video, I'll just link it up here so that you can go back and check out what I did. I've seen loads of different interpretations of this. Some people who don't have inkjet printers and so have adapted the technique and tried lots of different things. What I'm loving about this one so far is how willing everybody is to experiment with paint and creating impressions on fabric, and there have been some really impressive and quite striking results from those experiments, so that's been wonderful to see over on our Facebook group. If you don't know about our Facebook group, all the details are in the description below, so you can go and check that out and join and see what everybody's been up to. So this week I'm going to focus on the 5 Olympic rings. We're right in the middle of the Olympics at the moment, coming towards the end I suppose. Britain, I think, is doing pretty well compared to previous years, and so I'm quite happy with our results. I think there have been some shockers. So we're going to work on our Olympic rings today, and just as a reminder, this is what we're creating. So our top row is blue, black, red, and our bottom row is yellow and green, and the Olympic rings are all joined at different places, so we need to take note of where the overlaps are and where the rings pass under. The idea is that these are all linked together, so if these were 3-dimensional rings, oh, I've just noticed my reflection. Hello! If these were actual rings and you held them up by the red, they would all join together and hang in a string. So we want to create that sense of connectedness because I think that is appropriate for our channel and our little community here. So I want to try and recreate that if possible. So I'm going to keep that reference close by, and I think we'll work them in order like this. So I will tell you what you need for each ring. We're going to explore some different techniques. I'm going to tell you what you need for each ring as we go along. So what I will try and do is put chapter markers in so that you can go back and find each technique. Now you can mix and match these techniques depending on what resources you've got. So I have been very much guided by the resources I have for each ring. So let's start really simple with our blue ring, and we're going to use couching for this. So I've got some t-shirt yarn here in shades of blue. This was as close as I could get, and I did find a piece that was a solid colour in just a royal blue, but I didn't like it as much as having a bit of variety on it. Now, if you don't have t-shirt yarn, you can make it fairly easily. I've seen a video recently, I can't remember who it's by, it might be K3N. If that is who it was, I will link that video in the description below. But essentially, you just cut a strip out of jersey fabric, an old t-shirt, and pull it and end to end, stretch it out, and when you let it go it will curl into this yarn. You can actually crochet with this or do finger knitting with it or whatever. You can stitch it together in spirals and make bowls, so it's a really great way of using old clothes. So t-shirts don't tend to do very well long term, so that you can take them to a charity shop. So I know lots of people turn them into dusters, but you can actually turn them into yarn and knit and crochet with them and turn them into another garment, and then any holes or damage doesn't show. So we're just going to couch this. I'm just looking at my reference photo. I'm just going to get a heat erase pen and I'm going to create a little key for myself. So here, that's where the blue goes over, and I'm going to put a cross where the blue goes under. So that's a white heat erase pen. It will show up a bit more in a moment. Just worried that the ink, it's obviously the ink of the pen is wet, and this is a water soluble ink, so I don't want to do anything too dramatic. So here the blue is going to go over, and here the yellow is going to go over. So what I'm going to do is start my couching at this point. Now, couching we've covered loads of times on this channel. I've got some blue pearl cotton here because I wanted it to be kind of visible. So I'm going to, if I start my ring at the point where the yellow overlaps, it doesn't really matter what technique I do for the yellow, I'll be able to make it appear to be going over. Now, couching, really simple. You lay one thread or one material on the surface and use another thread to put stitches over the top to catch that down. So that is what I'm going to do. Let's bring this thread through from the back first of all. So I'm going to use my line as a guide because that's the way I'm going to get a good result. So I'm stitching onto the line. I've come up on the line. I'm going to lay my t-shirt yarn on and I'm going to go back down on that line, and I want to catch, the first one's always a bit tricky, I just want to catch that t-shirt yarn in place with that stitch. I want to be very close to the edge of the t-shirt yarn. I can always trim it back. Sometimes you can bring the thread that's going to be couched through to the surface from the back. You get a really neat beginning then, but t-shirt yarn isn't going to do that. So I'm just laying it on the surface. Now, I covered couching in my C stitches video a couple of weeks ago, and you can make some patterns with couching, so that's what I'm going to do. You can just do a simple stitch over the top, but I think I want to create some patterns with the stitches, so I'll just put another stitch over the top, and that is going to sit fairly close to that first stitch, like that. And then I'm going to put another one fairly close, so I'm looking for my line, checking my spacing, and as long as you come up on the line and go down on the line on the right side of your t-shirt yarn, so I've come up on the top edge and I'm going to go back down on that line on the bottom edge of my t-shirt yarn, so my couching thread has gone right over the top. As long as you follow that line, whatever you're couching will go in the direction you want it to. So we're just manipulating, it's a form of fabric manipulation, I suppose. We're manipulating this laid thread to head where we want it to. So I think I'm going to put a cross stitch now. So I'm going to come up again, similar distance away on my circle line. I should have reminded you, we drew these circles on last time, so my circles are already lined up, and I'm going to go across the t-shirt yarn and along the line a little bit, so that should make a diagonal stitch like that. And then I'm going to come up on the line again where that last stitch went down, but this time I'm going to bring it up on the top of the t-shirt yarn, the inner edge, and then I'm going to find that stitch. Where did it go down? There, and come across my t-shirt yarn and down on the inner edge, and that should put a little cross on my couching. So can you see that there? Hope you can. So now I'm going to put 3 bars again, so just making sure my spacing is correct. Making sure I'm coming up on the correct edge of my t-shirt yarn to create those bars, finding my stitch again, going along a little bit, coming back out on the top. So all I'm doing is putting little stitches over that t-shirt thread, and you can see I'm just moving the t-shirt yarn to find that stitch, and I'm going in at the same point, and that means that I'm going to definitely have a nice straight bar. Across my t-shirt thread. So I'm going 3 bars across and 3 bars, and I'm just going to work my way around the circle in that way. So I won't make you watch me do all of this at normal speed, but I will fast forward through this bit of the video so that you can watch me do it, but at a higher speed. Thank you so much to everybody for your lovely comments on my video that I shot when I was on holiday, and all your well wishes for a lovely time. We really did have an absolute blast. It was such a good time away, much needed. I think this year has been quite a challenge so far. You start every year with high hopes, don't you, that it's going to be a really good year, but you just can't ever tell what's going to come your way. So it was much needed, very appreciated, and I've come back feeling very refreshed and full of inspiration, lots of colour inspiration while we were away. So look out for some inspired by Italy videos coming soon. I need to actually catch up. I've been chasing my tail a little bit. I'm filming this video very late, so we got back in the early part of Thursday morning. Our flight was delayed on the way back, so we had a very challenging return journey, and so Thursday was just doing laundry and sort of being exhausted. went to see my dad because he hadn't seen me for a couple of weeks, so popped in to see my dad. And then Friday was just sort of relaxing and another recovery day. It takes me quite a long time to recover because of my arthritis. So that was Friday, and so now it's Saturday, and I've just had quite a few orders of autumn leaf garland kits after Wednesday's video, so still have plenty left, but we'll be restocking those soon, no doubt. So if you haven't seen that, do check it out. There's a link to our online shop in the description below. And so this is Saturday. This video's going out tomorrow, so there is a fair bit of work for me to do during the rest of today. So once I've caught up, I'll be able to go through all my Italy photos and draw some inspiration for some projects for you to have a go at, I'm sure. I've also got a landscape workshop coming up in the next couple of weeks as well. So if you're booked into that and are waiting for information, it's coming this week. I've been away, obviously, so yeah, that's on its way. Please bear with me. So lots to do. It's going to be a busy rest of the summer, I think, and we've got all our back to school stuff to organise. As well, ready for September, and we've got a little bit of work to do on the house. So yeah, we've had our holiday. It definitely feels like we're back to normal life now, and there's plenty to do. So I hope you're all having a great summer, and if you've gone away or are away at the moment, I hope you're having an absolutely wonderful time. Do let me know in the comments if you have gone on holiday. Let me know where you've visited, and if you're having a staycation, how are you making sure you're having plenty of time to relax. Love to hear what you've been up to over the summer so far. I love all your comments. I've got some to catch up on. I do try and reply to every comment, but sometimes it takes me a while. I've got quite a few comments to catch up on, so please bear with me. But yeah, I love reading your comments. It's so great to be part of a community of such lovely people. So if you've never commented before, let this be the first video that you say hi on, because it just makes my day. Okay, I'm right at the end now. I've got a little bit of overlap, so I'm just going to go in and trim that so that the two ends sit together. I've finished with a 3-bar, so that means that the yellow ring is going to cross over where the cross would be, which I'm fine with. So I'm just going to finish off my thread like that, and that's our first Olympic ring done. Right, for our yellow, what I've got here is a bangle. This is just a cheap bangle. I think I got them from Primark in the UK. I got a set of about 10, and it just happens that it is almost perfectly the size of the rings that we are creating, and it's obviously going to sit nicely in between the two parts of the blue. And I thought we could do some wrapping of this ring. I almost did a crochet ring, but I decided it was too complicated. So what I've got here is some yellow wool. This is just Aran weight wool, and I'm going to need quite a lot of this. It's going to be quite cumbersome at the beginning, but it'll get easier as we go along. So what have I got here? I've got about 5.5 meters. What's that? 17 feet, something like that. And I've got one of these little plastic needles that tends to come in children's sewing kits. They're great for weaving. I'm just going to thread my needle up. Now, I have been told that if you put a bead on the thread, it stops it tangling up so much. I don't know whether that's true or not. I've never tried it, but give it a whirl. If it's true, do let me know. So what I want to do is I've got my bangle, I've got my yarn threaded up, and what I want to do is lay a tail like that along my bangle, and we're going to stitch over the top of it. So I want to lay the tail along the bangle and then have my yarn coming back in the direction I want it. I'm going to take my needle through the bangle. If you don't have one of these, by the way, you can just use like a bodkin or a doll needle or a chunky blunt needle. A wool needle would be fine. I'm going to go through the bangle and under it, and then over the top of the yarn, which is forming a big loop here, and I'm just going to pull it all through, and I want to make sure that tail is in that loop that I've created. So you can see there's a loop around, a loop and a twist there. I want that tail to go through that loop, and that stitch is going to catch that tail in place. Now we're going to stitch over that tail. That's held in place now. We're going to stitch over that tail to hide it. So again, through the bangle, out over the top of the working yarn, and just keep pulling. This will just be a little blanket stitch all around the outside. We want our stitch to lay alongside the previous one, so covering up the bangle, closing up any gaps. So again, in through the bangle, over the thread or yarn, make sure that tail is hidden inside. Keep pulling. Lay your thread next to the previous one, and off we go again. So through the bangle, over the top of the wool, tail inside that loop, and keep pulling. Right, so now it's jumped to the other side. I just want to ease it back and make sure we're going round clockwise. If you're left-handed, obviously you're going to be working anti-clockwise, so just keep an eye on where your thread is landing. Once you've got about 10 stitches, you can cut the rest of the tail off. It's not going to unravel, it's not going anywhere. This is essentially the way you begin a Dorset button. We did a whole live stream on making Dorset buttons that turned into one of the most embarrassing experiences of my life, because everything kept tangling up. My setup then was far more complicated, and I had no space to work. You just need space to be able to get your dominant hand and arm going quite far away from your body. So if you're in quite a cramped space, this is going to be trickier than it needs to be. And we're just going to carry on with this until we're all the way around. You could make this entirely as a Dorset button, but like I said in last Sunday's video, I want to maintain the bubbles. I don't want to lose the print on that backing fabric, so I'm not going to fill in the shape. So I just want this covered ring. And if you want to, you can make little picots around the edge. You could decorate this in whatever way you want to. It's up to you. So if you want a ring that isn't quite a ring but has got sort of little petals or whatever coming off it, you can do whatever you like. I think I'm just going to keep this quite simple. Okay, I've gone all the way around, and you can, if you want to, turn that little seam across the top to the inside if you want. I really like it on the outside, so I'm going to leave it there, but you can just manipulate that a little bit. I'm going to cut off my thread enough to leave a tail, and then you do need a normal needle. I'm getting a chunkier needle with a bigger eye. This will not unravel, so even though we're not technically tying anything off, it will be perfectly fine. So I'm finding where my last thread is coming out, and I'm going to slide my needle, just threaded it up into a normal needle, underneath those first stitches where we caught the tail before. So I'm heading in the same direction. Now obviously you're working around a curve, so you won't be able to go too far. You want to try and not split the yarn. So I'm just going to wiggle that until it comes through. I'm not actually pulling that hard, and then make sure you're only catching a single thread, and then I'm just going to trim that off there, and then you can just maneuver your blanket stitching back into place. And if you're not happy, it's a little bit lumpy, that it's not the end of the world. If you're not happy with the way it looks, then make sure you align it where the yellow is going to pass under the black. So I'm going to make sure that join is there, and this is where I have created a little problem for myself, because I should have done my blue, oh dear, I should have done my blue gap up here. Not the end of the world. I'm gonna do something miraculous with it, I'm sure. So that's where I'm going to put my yellow ring, and I'm going to couch that down. So with some of the thread that I had left over, so yeah, when you do your blue ring, you need to make sure the gap is where the blue will pass over the yellow, because I could have made that work really nicely, but I haven't, so I'm going to have to do something marvellous over there. I'll work something out. So to attach it down, I'm just going to take some of that leftover yarn, thread it back into that sharper needle. If you struggle, you can use a needle threader, but I tend to just twist it really tight, and that will get it through. What I'm going to do is just come up at the outer edge of my yellow ring and pull that wool through, hop over, so we're just couching it down basically, hop over and bring my needle through. Now if you wanted to use a finer cotton, you could stitch through the ridge with some invisible stitches, but I quite like that this is going to have an extra texture, so I'm going to put my stitches about a centimetre apart. that needs to go underneath. I'm just going to ease that under. Make sure that you're coming up really close to the edge of your ring because you want it to sit in the right place. Hop over and down on the other side. So you might need to just manipulate whatever your ring is going over just a little tiny bit to make it sit in the right place. This is always going to look better if your stitches are fairly evenly spaced. Like that. So I'm just going to stitch around and attach that ring down. I'll come back when I've done. There we go, I've done a little repair. All I did was wrap some of the t-shirt yarn around the yellow bangle and couch it down with a couple of extra stitches, and it kind of blends in, and now my yellow is going underneath. So yeah, when you do your blue couching, make sure you leave the gap at the bit where the blue is supposed to go over the yellow, because otherwise it's not going to work. So, or you can do 2 gaps if you want to, and then you can fix it to your heart's content. So blue and yellow are done. So for our black ring, we're going to use some black wool again. It just happens to be what I've had, and I have got some of this Anchor metallic pearl cotton. So this is actually crochet cotton. It comes in 100 metre 25 gram balls, and this is a metallic white, and it's got a bit of glitter in it. I don't know how well the camera will pick up. It's sort of pearlescent, and it's got this iridescent blending filament through it that just glints really nicely, and I thought we could use that to add our black ring. And we're going to start by adding some straight stitches around the ring. So we're doing this ring here. I'm going to bring my thread through. I don't know how easy it's going to be to get this to pass through the fabric, and I'm going to make maybe 1 centimetre straight stitches, and it's really important that you don't pull these too tight. So you can, if you want to, if you've got a thin pencil or whatever, you could, if you wanted to, pop a pencil in like that and stitch over the pencil. So I probably don't want it that loose, but I'm just going to put a little, I'm not going to pull it tight, so it's going to stay just kind of loose off the fabric. I'm going to go round to 1 o'clock. I'm probably going to try and follow the positions on a clock around this and put another stitch in like that. Oh crikey, knocking everything over. So around a little bit more to kind of 2 o'clock. I'm going to mark them in actually. I'm making this unnecessarily difficult for myself. So we've got 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock, and then we've got it's like there and there, there and there, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock. So that's roughly those positions marked. I'm hoping they're going to stand out a bit more, because now I've done it I can't see it. There we go, that'll do. So I need to come round maybe a little bit further with this one. I've probably gone a bit short with 1 o'clock, but it's fine. So thread comes through, just want to loosen that off a bit. You could put little knots on the back if you want to, but it's not necessary. You only want a little bit of looseness. So that's 2 o'clock. And then 3 o'clock. I know there's not a white ring, the Olympic rings tend to be on a white background, but I wanted this to not totally blend in because I want the technique to be clear. So we're going to make a little wheel here out of the black wool, and there's lots of ways of making wheels. You can do woven wheels, but I'm going to do just one that's kind of couched down. So different couching techniques for these first few. Oh, I should use the thread. Let's take some ones to get used to the way the thread works. The fabric has over there, you'll see. And you put them stitch down here. Yeah, 9 o'clock. 10 o'clock. And stitch in the thread. I've got my big chunky needle that I used for couching the yellow one down. And I want a good long length of black yarn. Where should we start? Let's start here. It's fine. And I'm just going to put my black yarn underneath like that, and then I'm going to go underneath this one, just double checking that the right one is going to overlap, and underneath this one, underneath this one, underneath this one. You can use the eye end of the needle for this if you wish. I'm just going to hold on to that end, it will be fine. Like that. Now we want to go underneath the yellow ring here, so I'm going to use the eye end of my needle. And we're just going to keep going round and round and round in this way until we can't fit any more yarn underneath. So again, like with the yellow one, it will get easier the more yarn we use, because there'll be less to pull through. You can do this. If this was smaller, I would have wrapped the yarn around something, laid the circle on, and then stitched over the top, but it's just such a big circle, I thought it would be easier to do it with the stitches in place. Now I knew that was going to happen. Just going to pull that end back through and just hold it in place while I'm pulling the next layer of yarn through, and then oh, where am I? Here we go. Right, and now I'm just going to go around again. So I'm just going to keep going round until I can't fit any more yarn underneath these little bars that I've stitched in place, and I think it's going to look really nice with that iridescent white. These are just cheap acrylic yarns. I've inherited most of these. I couldn't tell you where they came from. So just remembering to go underneath the yellow bangle at that point. What I'm enjoying seeing is the background seems to be harmonising much better, because obviously we're using the same colours in our rings, and so it's starting to look far more harmonious as a piece and less kind of bizarre. I think it's such a strange colour combination, really. It's not a colour combination I would ever use. The reason these colours are chosen for the Olympics is that at least one of these colours appears in every national flag in the world. And so I think the idea is that all nations are represented in the Olympic rings because there's at least one colour from your country's flag in the Olympic rings. Okay, I think I'm happy enough with that. I think if I put any more in, it's just going to overpower, because black is such a strong colour. I think it's going to overpower the other rings, so I'm just going to trim that off there. And that's the black ring done. Jolly good. Right, so we can get on to our final two rings now, and these are going to be a lot more straightforward. So it's our green ring next, and I'm just going to mark on again, so it's going to go over here. Let's do it with a over, and it's going to go under here. So my little V there and my cross there. So with this one, I thought we could do a really simple applique. So I've got a piece of green felt here. I've marked in a ring. I initially did that in a ring, thought it looked too small, so I added another layer. This is just an offcut of felt, and I'm just going to cut this out. You could, if you wanted to, do this as a piece of Trapunto, put a little bit of filling in. It might be nice actually. Why don't we do that? I'm going to just fold my circle and make a little snip just for the inner ring, and I'm going to just cut out that inner circle. So it's going to go over there and it'll go under the red there, so it's fine. I can just do it like this. Now there's not a lot of space here for Trapunto. I thought it would be nice to use some metallic thread to stitch it down, just to add a little bit of something, because felt is quite flat, it's quite a flat colour, so I'm going to use 2 strands. When you're stitching with metallic thread, keep it quite short. It feels like you're going to be changing your thread often, but I promise you, you will regret it. Okay, so for this one I want a couple of pins in. It goes under the black here, so how are we going to do it? Let's make a little snip. So let's put it under. Pop a pin in over the black. This could be quite a wobbly circle. I don't mind. And then it's going to go under the red, but that's fine. We just want it to marry up. I'm just going to pin it into place. And when you're doing applique rings, my advice is always start by stitching down the inner. The inner becomes much more difficult if you stitch the outside first. I don't know why. I think it's just under more tension. So I'm just going to do an applique stitch very quickly around the outside. So I'm going to go up through both layers, so just inside a circle, and then I'm going to tuck my needle right up against the edge of the felt and go down just through the backing. You could do this with blanket stitch if you wanted to. I'm going to do just applique stitch. And again, you want your stitches to be relatively close together and fairly even, because we're using a glittery thread, a metallic. It will be visible, so you want to try and make them fairly even. Helps to run metallic thread through beeswax as well, which I also haven't done, so I am making life unnecessarily difficult for myself here. Now I have to say, Trapunto is not a technique I particularly warm to. I think it's really hard to get a good result, because when you fill a shape that is appliqued on the surface, that fabric needs somewhere to go, and you tend to pull your backing out of shape, so it often will cause a lot of distortion and will mess up your results, I think, often. So it's probably my lack of expertise and the fact that I don't use it very often, so I haven't fully learnt all the tricks. I tend to build slack into the shape that I'm appliquing on. I'm actually going to stop there with that thread because it is looking a bit ragged. So I'll finish that off, and then I'll just get some more thread and finish going around the inner ring, and then I'll come back and show you what I'm going to do next. Okay, I have stitched all around the inside, and what I want to do now, I've got some of this black wool left over. I'm going to use this for filling my shape. So I've just threaded up a needle just so that I've got it handy. Now I know I've got an opening just underneath this black bar here, so I'm just going to keep that handy, and I'm going to go back and stitch around the outside edge, but like I said, I'm just going to ease it back a little bit just to create some slack. So I'm just pushing the felt up a little bit, pushing it towards the inside just to create a little bit of slack, and then I can go around and just applique down the outside edge. So I'm just easing it back a little tiny bit, hardly any at all, with my thumb. I'm just not, normally if I was appliquing I would smooth everything flat, but can you see this? Maybe you can't see, there's a little ridge there, and that's going to help my background to not distort too much when I fill it. We're going to fill it with wool. We're making a little channel for that wool to sit in. Okay, I've got my ring stitched down. I've lost my ends, but I'll put those back in when I've done this bit. I've got my black wool. I don't need a knot in the end or anything, and I know that I've got a channel underneath here. I've got an open end, so if I just pull back that black wool, I've got my open end here, and I'm just going to feed my wool. I've got the eye end of my needle going through, and I'm just going to feed the wool. Probably could do with a longer needle here, but it's alright. You could do it with a very small safety pin as well if you want to. I'm just going to feed it through that channel all the way around the ring. Careful you don't pop out the side. You can see I've almost popped out the side a couple of times because the applique stitches aren't absolutely dead next to each other. There are spaces for the needle to pop. You could do this with string as well, or twine. Anything that will go through the channel. So at the moment it's looking awful, all bunched up, but I'm hoping that it will smooth out as I go. Otherwise I've just lost a needle and this piece becomes quite dangerous. Probably going to, I'm trying to go too far with it, I think. Here we go. I should be popping out the other end. That's it. So you can go around several times if you want to, or you could do a double or treble thickness of wool. But once you're through, you just pull that wool. Don't pull too far before you flatten everything out, because you don't want everything all puckered up. So just smooth it down. That might be enough. Maybe I need to go around once more just to add a little bit of extra padding, but you can see how Trapunto creates distortion. That's even with some easing, but it's just lifted that surface of the ring up a little bit. I think I'm only going to go around once. Snip off the end, and then I can, because I've been fiddling about around this black ring, the ends of my wool have come out, so I'm just going to pop them back underneath. And again, if you wanted to put a bit of fabric glue, just a little dab to make sure the ends don't come unthreaded all the time, that might help as well. So there we go. So we've got a bit of applique with padding, bit of Trapunto for our green ring, which means we've only got one ring left, and this one's going to be super easy. I've got a square of red fabric here that I am going to locate behind that circle, so you can probably guess where we're heading with this. We're going to do some reverse applique, so I just want to make sure that my ring is definitely on the fabric and there is space all around it. That's fine. So I've got some red thread here. You can use whatever thread you like. If you want some glitter thread, that will work just fine. I've just got some normal embroidery thread, and I'm going to take 2 strands, and again I want to mark a second ring, and I don't want this to be too difficult for me, so I want to kind of roughly centre it, but I don't want to make my life really hard. So I'm going to make sure my circle is a decent distance away from the outer circle, like that. So I've made a ring that's about 1 centimetre thick, and what we're going to do is backstitch. So super simple. Bring our thread up, go back on ourselves, and then bring our needle forward, so there's a gap between where the thread comes out and where the needle is coming out, and then we go back to the end of that first stitch, go back through the fabric, and then rock forward to leave a gap again. And I'm going to go right the way around the inner ring and then around the outer ring as well. I'm just trying to flatten out the fabric because I don't want any puckering. So this is the easiest one till last. Well, this bit's easy anyway. Okay, so I've backstitched around the outside and inside, and you can see here I've backstitched over the green where the red goes over the top, and I've stopped my backstitch at the green where the red ring goes under. So what you're going to need now is a seam ripper, and we're going to take away the printed fabric and the wadding from underneath. So I'm just sliding my seam ripper in just inside my back stitch, and I'm just going to create a bit of a hole so that I can get my scissors in, like that. And then I want to slide my scissors in, making sure I'm not coming through to the back. So with both the seam ripper and your scissors, you just want to make sure you're not going through to the back of your panel, because you want to stop short of that fabric that we've stitched onto the back. So just so that you can see, got my blanket stitch and my back stitch in 2 rings through that backing fabric. You can trim this back if you want to. I'll probably do that at the end, and I'm just snipping my way around, trying to get as close to my blanket stitches as I can without cutting them. So just take your time with this. Now when I get to the bit where my red ring is going under the green, I'm going to just snip around that outside edge like that. Got a bit of the green metallic thread showing through, so I'm taking that away, and then I can go back in the other direction. So just taking tiny snips. You can always go back and tidy this up, it's not a problem. So before you clamp your scissors together, just make sure you are not catching that red fabric. Like I say, you can go back and trim it up, get even closer to your back stitch. And it's better to take away less and then trim than to try and do it all in one go and end up cutting either your stitches or your reverse applique fabric. Now you are going to have some wadding if you're using wadding, just peeking out. I don't mind that at all. I quite like that this technique reveals the structure of the piece, but if it bothers you, you can go around and blanket stitch around the two edges using your back stitch as a guide for where to position your blanket stitches, and you can work them very close together or a distance apart, and you can basically create something like an eyelet or like a similar technique to what you'd do if you were creating a buttonhole. So it takes a little bit of patience, this, because it can be a bit fiddly. We're not keeping these bits, so you can cut them off to save you having to work around the bit that you are cutting away. I'm just going to cut across and we'll deal with the overlap in a second. Now what we need to do is deal with this section that's inside, and I'm going to cut right across the green felt. Now we had to do the green felt first because we needed it overlapping. So I'm going to take away that bit of green felt and being really cautious here because I don't want to cut my red fabric at the back. There we go. I just want my scissors to come through the other side. There we go. I'm going to go back in the opposite direction. You do need sharp scissors for this, and ideally you want them sharp right up to the point. And you really don't want to forget which bit's meant to be cut away and which bit isn't. So just going to get rid of my wadding there. I can go back and trim that up. There's obviously a lot of layers there and felt is quite thick, so it is tricky to get really close to the red stitching, but it's not impossible. You just have to go steady. And then I'm just going to get some tape, just normal sticky tape, and I'm just going to press it on and lift it off, and that'll take away any stray fluff that is spoiling the effect. So it just cleans up that reverse applique. You'll get some frayed fibres, but that is part of the reverse applique charm. So there we go, 5 rings, 5 techniques, and we've got the beginnings of quite an interesting Olympic Games panel for August. So I hope you've enjoyed that. If you have, please do hit that like button. It really helps us out, it helps other people to find our channel as well. Do share your creations at hashtag FSHWingingIt24 if you're sharing on Instagram, and if you want to join our private Facebook group, there's a link in the description below and you can share your work there as well. If you have enjoyed this and want to do some other shapes and surface work on fabric, I'll link a video here, and down here I will put the complete Winging It 2024 playlist so that you can go and see what we've done in all the other months. Have a great week making your Olympic rings. Take care, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!